Well, something has changed in this latest lockdown. During the stricter restrictions in spring, you could still get clothes in supermarkets that carry them, perfume in pharmacies, and greeting cards in newsagents. But now retailers complain that they've been told that they must cease selling all these non-essential items. So is this just the rules being applied fairly or being implemented to an absurd degree? That's what we'll be discussing in a moment here with Minister of State Damien English and Independent TD Michael McNamara. First, though, I'm joined from Limerick by Vincent Jennings, who is representing the Convenience Stores and Newsagents Association. Good evening, Vincent. Thanks so much for joining us. Listen, I gather that some of the small shops you represent have had visits from the Gardaí telling them not to sell greeting cards and flowers. Is that right, Vincent?
That's right, Miriam, and thank you. Yes, since Sunday we started taking calls from people who had visits from local Gardaí, and they were telling them a variety of products, books, magazines, greeting cards, flowers, wreaths, stationery, and Christmas decorations. And it really, I mean, the list is, I won't say it's non-exhaustive, but there would be products that we would ordinarily sell, Miriam.
Minister, it's not fair.
Well, again, the virus is not fair, and all the restrictions in place here are temporary of nature, and they are trying to protect us from the virus.
Are socks for your child essential?
Clothes are not essential, but again, there's still, of course, in all situations, there's a bit of common sense, and the Gardaí have been very...
That seems mad, Minister.
Well, again, what's essential, what's not essential, okay?
So I can buy a bottle of wine, but I cannot buy socks for my son.
Socks come under clothes, Mary. And Mary,
but most people regard them as essential.
We can go through exactly, and Vincent regards the book as essential. So everybody has their own view on this.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that the purpose of this is sort of to avoid the unintended consequence of the last lockdown, when all retail activity was pushed into the big retailers, the big chain retailers. But my fear is that the unintended consequence of this is that all retail activities, or a lot of it, is put online. And when activity goes online, we know that a large proportion of it is bought from people, from companies and large conglomerates that are not based in Ireland, not employing people in Ireland, not paying taxes in Ireland. So it's a loss of jobs in Ireland, and it's a loss of taxes in Ireland.
That's a fair point, and that's why since March, a lot has been. We've worked a lot with the retail sector to bring them online. Over 9,500 businesses have drawn down a voucher to help them trade online and go online. Plus, I want to be clear here, all the goods that Vincent and Marion that you've mentioned as well, they can still be bought, but they can be bought in combination of online, click and deliver, click and collect, or you can remotely order, ring in, order your goods,
have them delivered or picked up as well. Minister, can't click and collect, they don't have it.
But that's what I'm saying, remote ordering, you can ring in your order, so it's not just click and collect.
Once we go online, and once they're online, they know that they have to compete with the Amazons of the world, which is very hard to do. I mean, if you type in shoes, you're not going to get Pat McCarthy shoes in Ennis. You're going to get something on Amazon.
And Michael, it
is very difficult for them to compete online.
Yeah, but I think
that is one of the concerns that I have. The other thing is, with regard to determining what's essential, I mean, at the end of the day, at some point, we're going to have to trust people again as to what is essential. I accept that a pair of pyjamas might not be essential, but I had an email from a woman who was preparing to go to the maternity hospital in Limerick this week, and wanted to get a pair of pyjamas in advance of going to the maternity hospital and couldn't. Now, she was annoyed. I appreciate that in ordinary circumstances it might not be, but, you know, we do have to trust people at some point. And I'm not convinced that this is a good use of Garda time policing this. I mean, sorry, that's not a criticism of Garda Síochána. I made it very clear in the debate last week. They will do what the Oireachtas tasks them
to be fair to the Gardaí, they're reinforcing the public health message. The Gardaí presence that only will be needed as this moves on here.
Again, I mean, I received a phone call from a woman who works in a large retailer, and then as a family came in to buy shirts for a funeral, she went to her manager and said, look, this is urgent, they need shirts, and he said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Yeah, the law's law. But, you know, I think there's a bigger issue to answer here, and that's whether or not this is necessary. Thankfully, in each of the last 7 days, we've seen that the number of detected cases was lower than the previous than the same day the previous week. And I mean, it does beg the question whether level 4 was working, whether less restrictions were working. You could attribute that, and people, I'm sure, will try to attribute it to the lockdown. But in fairness, like last Wednesday, Professor Philip Nolan, who's the head of the modelling group in NEFID, said that it would take 3 weeks for it to kick in, unless people had already modified their behaviour. And if people had already modified their behaviour, then why are we shutting down retail and putting 55,000 people in the pandemic?
Again, the reason we're gone to to level 5, and we did try to attempt, and we resisted level 5 as long as we possibly could to stay at level 3. We all hoped that our behaviour would result in a reduction in the virus. It didn't work. We went to level 5 now with the best advice. We've worked with the retail sector. The majority of them are able to trade in their goods. They mightn't be in the store, but they're on, which is different to 6 months ago. And I do think, and Michael, I would agree with you, the hope is here that these are temporary restrictions for a very short period of time, that we can get back to full retail open in a strong position in December. That's what we're trying to do.
As I spoke to him a little earlier, he's fine, but for those small shop assistants and shop owners who are trying to sell a wreath for someone for All Souls Day, that's what they said earlier to Vincent. Can they do that?
No, Miriam, they can't, because it's not essential trade. What's essential is, of course, food. We know that. And we can list off loads of things here. But, Mary, I'll ask you, if you're at home tonight in your house, do you really have to go out to buy that wreath this week or next week? Because we're saying to you, public health advice
Many people in Ireland for All Souls Day, I don't need to tell you that. I totally understand. It's so important.
No, of course it is. I totally understand that. But so is their health today. And we're trying to protect people's lives this week and next week. And I totally understand the importance of November, but we can do that later on. We can say a prayer for them. You can visit the grave. We recognise that, but we're asking people to please minimise our journeys.
I'm Vincent Jennings. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight.